Hello, and welcome to the second episode of As the Worms Turn. I'm out here at the worm bins right now, and it's a beautiful sunny day outside. A little cool, but pleasant working temperature. And the bins are reading 55. This is a bin that I put food waste down on, and I've been in here turning it. I was hoping, since I didn't see a whole lot of worms up on the top, that I had pretty good worm population down where the food waste was, and that is indeed the case. So I just wanted to show you a little bit how I work my worm bins. The first thing I want to show you is a couple of tools that I use. The first thing is, this is probably one of my most important tools, and it's a compost fork. And let me just get this up here so that you can see it. Let's see if I can get it in front of me, then the lighting's a little bit better. Compost fork sort of looks like an old hay fork, but the tines are closer together. It has a little bit of a scoop to it, so that when you work your compost, you can actually pick stuff up and turn it. It has the pointed tines. And this is probably one of the tools that I use the most in the worm bin. I use it to turn the bin. It gets deep enough that I can turn down the full 18 inches if I want, or I can just skim the top and turn the top. It all just depends on where the worm bin is in its life, its total life. So basically, I start along the outside edges and I just turn it. And what you're doing is you're trying to get air down into the bed for the worms, and you're trying to mix up the bedding. Right now I've got a lot of leaves on the top that were put down pretty heavily for the winter time to help insulate the beds. And I will say that, I am willing to bet that most of the worms that are in this bed right now overwintered. They're too big to have hatched from cocoons. And this bed was frozen. So for anybody that tells you that worms can't go through a freeze, I would beg to differ. Now there's a big, I don't know if you can see that or not. Let's see if I can get that in there close enough. No, you're not going to be able to see. It's too dark. I will take some still pictures and drop some worms on the ground. Let me just pick these up right quick. This is a big pocket of worms right here. Anyway, I think that probably part of the key to overwintering your worms is to make sure that the beds are not too wet, so that it's a dry freeze. And then if the bin has enough volume, then it probably doesn't freeze quite so solid in the center of the bin. But I am just really pleased with how these bins wintered with as cold and snowy as our winter was. So anyway, I just worked my way up and down the bed. There's another big pocket of worms right there. It's a big thing of food waste. The worms are just thick in that. And just work my way up and down the bed, turning and getting the bedding mixed up. This is a perfect time of year to do that because it's still cool outside, it's safe, and I'm even trying to encourage a little bit of composting so that the bedding will heat up a little bit more and the material will start breaking down to the point where the worms can really get to it. And so that's what I do, up and down the bed from one side to the other, make sure that everything gets mixed up really well. After I do that, Then I have another tool that I use. I'll show that to you. And I'm sure any gardener has this tool around and probably uses it a lot. This one I use exclusively for my worm bin, and it is a 3-prong compost, or not compost, but cultivator. Let's see, which way do I need to move? 3-prong cultivator. I'm going the wrong direction. I use this a lot. And what I do with it is I use it to move my bedding around, get it mixed up, break up the clods, and get the surface smoothed out, get the air all incorporated in there, get it mixed up good. And then once I do that, then I go back through and I make myself a little trench down the middle. Down the middle is where you're going to put your food waste. And the reason you do that, especially in a bin this size, is especially during the summertime when you think you might get a little composting action going on. And in the summertime you really need to be careful anyway. You need to be really careful what you do adding material to the bed, because the heat will kill the worms really fast. Anyway, you dig a trench, and this is where the food waste is going to go. As a matter of fact, I got a lot of food waste right there from the last time I fed. And the worms are thick through the center here. And the food waste is going to go down there, and what it does is it gives an area for the worms to come and feed. If it starts composting and it gets hot, they have these outer edges that they can go to where it's going to be cooler and there's still going to be food to eat, but it will not be life-threatening for them. So what I have here is a bucket of food slop. I don't know if you can see that or not, but my neighbor brings me his food waste. It keeps him from having to throw it away, and it gives me food for my worms. And the first thing I do, if it's been sitting around a while, is I take it out and I lean it on its side and I drain all the excess moisture off, because I want to control the moisture in my bed. The moisture isn't necessarily a bad thing, but too much is. And so I don't, I want to know what kind of moisture is going on in my bed. And I just shake this out down my trough. You see how goopy it is? This has been sitting around all winter. It froze up, and after it thawed, then I've just been adding it to the worm bins. And then I use my cultivator and I spread that out so that it's nice and even down my trough. I don't have any big clumps. I want the worms to be able to get into this without it being a toxic heap. Okay? And then what I do is I go ahead and I pull some of this side stuff back over to cover it up. You really want to cover your food waste. That's going to keep down the flies. If the flies get into it, you'll have maggots. And you don't want maggots. You don't want, it's just not pleasant to deal with. But you cover it up, and then you don't have any of the fruit flies. You don't have the regular flies. You don't have any of those problems because it's buried in the bed. And then what you do is you come back through with a load of fresh bedding, leaves, manure, shredded paper, whatever you're using, and you put a layer of that down on top of this. Before I do that, though, I'm going to put a little water in it, because the bedding is definitely dry enough that I can put some water down and it will be beneficial for the bed. And then I'm going to come back with a couple buckets, 5-gallon buckets of leaves. I'm going to spread that out even on the bed, water again, and I'm done. Okay? That's episode 2.